Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Let's get started. We got a good talk this evening. I'm Ewan Bates. I'm the president I'm not the president. Sorry. But the boss is on vacation and it's going to my head. I got to tell you that. I am the vice president of philanthropy and engagement here at the San Diego Natural History Museum. I'm delighted to be here in my capacity as both a NAT staffer and also as president of the board of the San Diego Audubon Society, and I know a few Audubon Society members are with us tonight. I love being in both of these roles, and it is simply a pleasure to welcome you all here tonight to talk about one of my favorite subjects, birds. Before we get started, I want to recognize and pay our respects to the indigenous peoples who are the traditional stewards of this land. Specifically, we recognize the Kumeyaay people, whose ancestral homelands the museum currently occupies. As the current caretakers and conservationists, we honor their continued legacy of understanding, caretaking, and upholding the pillars of biodiversity. We all know we live in an extraordinary place, don't we? You may not know that San Diego County is the most biologically diverse county in the contiguous United States, and that we've already lost more than 60% of our original natural areas. There has never been a more critical time to be here for nature. Here at the NAT, we've been a quiet but effective force for nature in our region for nearly 149 years. We were founded by a group of amateur naturalists in 1874, and since that time, we've been working to study, document, conserve, and inspire people about the natural world in our region, which includes Southern California and all of the Baja Peninsula. Every day, our scientists are identifying new species, unlocking the relationships between plants and animals, and using science to conserve threatened and endangered species. In the coming years, we plan to be a louder, stronger voice and an active player to preserve this natural place. Their severe habitat loss occurred on our watch. It helped make San Diego the world-class city it is today, and it is time that we preserve what we have left in the face of climate change, pollution, and invasive species. All right, enough of my soapbox. Before we begin the program, I have a few reminders for everyone. Emergency exits in the back and the front of the theater, and we ask that you silence your phones, but that you stay active on social media using hashtag NatTalk. This season of Nat Talks is made possible by the presenting sponsor, Downey Family Foundation, and our media partner, KPBS, the public media station serving San Diego and Imperial counties. Tonight, we're going to explore nature in a different way. We're going to hear about the many benefits of spending time within nature, and in particular with birds, for one's physical and mental health and overall well-being. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speaker. Tammah Watts is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified mindfulness outdoor guide, and an advocate for equitable accessibility of nature, health, and mental health for all. She has worked in the community for over 35 years in managerial, clinical, and consulting roles for private, nonprofit, community college, and public sectors. She brings that same passion for conservation and birding and serves on the Audubon California Board of Directors, the Southern California Audubon Council representative for 15 local chapters and college clubs, as well as the Buena Vista Audubon Board of Directors. She is the author of the new book, Keep Looking Up, which I know many of you already purchased, which weaves together personal stories and avian life to reveal the marvelous phenomenon shared among us. After the talk, be sure to head to the bookstore and get your first copy or maybe a second copy because you'll be so inspired, and make sure you have it signed. All right, Justin. What time is it?
Oh, I don't know what time. Hey, Tammah, what time is it?
I don't know, Justin. Brian, what time is it?
I don't know, Tammah. What time is it?
What time is it?
What time is it?
All right, everyone. We said it was interactive. Hello, San Diego. I'm so happy to see you. Come on. Don't let me just do this myself. It's interactive this evening. Brian, can you turn it up a notch? Come on now. Here we go. Come on. Very good. Welcome. It's an interactive evening. I'm happy to see you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, are you awake? I know it's the evening. It's a Tuesday. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, San Diego Natural History Museum. I'm out of breath. Okay. And I really am. This really touches my heart. And if I cry, I do. Because this is really a full circle moment for me. I am not young, as many know. And I have been coming here and being brought since I was very young to the zoo, to Balboa Park, and to this very museum. As a little girl, many Sundays especially, and ultimately my eldest even volunteered here at the Nat, and that's where she learned to touch tarantulas. So it's just, and I am a San Diego native, so this is wonderful to be here and at the Nat, so thank you so much. And tonight we are going to be talking a whole lot about birds, and life and living. And I have a confession to make, and that is, I'm really very much afraid of birds. Birds that fly near my head, over at me, I just have this fear. So as much of a terrified fear that I have of wild birds, if they're near my head, equal is my passion for birds as well, and what they've meant in my life, and that's why I'm here. I want to share that story, my story, and hopefully it'll resonate with all of you. So, growing up, like I said, I was very much afraid of birds, and this goes to, I lived in Encanto in Southeast San Diego, and my mother, Fran, was very much ahead of her time, and you'll read about Fran in the book, and so she wanted us to have a farm, and it was across the street. We lived in an area that was rural, but in the city as well. And so she decided that it would be great. A farm means you have goats, you have cows, horses, chickens, ducks. That's what a farm is. So she was told that you can't just have one goat. You'd have to have more than one, and that they'll eat the bumper off your car. So she envisioned goats eating her Volkswagen bumper. So she decided, I'm not going to do that one. I'm not going to get goats. But she decided that we would have chickens. And she decided to name the chickens after the apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. True story. And Rocky. Now, Rocky's real name was Judas because he would flock at the heads of every single person that came on the property. He would just attack them and the other chickens. And so his name, being Judas, she felt was blasphemous for folks to know about that, being a preacher's child, that she was. And instead, we would call him Rocky after the boxer. And that's where I became, at the very young age, afraid of birds, because he would attack our heads whenever we went over, except for Fran. And so as that kind of set in for me at a very young age, that fear. Equally, though, my love was born out of my duck. I was allowed to pick out one pet, and I picked out a little duck, a little bright, it was young, it was a little bright yellow one like this, and I would carry that duck everywhere with me, and that was where my first connection with birds come from. And so I just want to ask you to think in your mind, what is your earliest memory of a bird? Like to yourselves, just think about that. What's your earliest memory of a bird? And that was mine, is this little fluffy duck. When I was sad, I would hold it and it would tuck its bill under my arm. I would carry it around to the point where Fran would say, "Put that duck down." And I didn't. It loved me. I loved it as well. And so that was my earliest memory. And this evening, like I mentioned, I hope the takeaways will be that you'll have a deeper appreciation and understanding about how birds show up in our lives and can enrich our lives. and also about our story, my story, your story, and that makes our collective story. And Norzil Hurston's famous saying, "There's no greater agony than an untold story," really speaks to that, I think. And when you reflect, you'll come to know that birds show up in our lives. And my belief is, if you think about it, a story is a moment, is our moment-to-moment lived experience, strung together, almost like a string of pearls, if you will, and that we can cast back and look at those stories. And so what I want to invite you to do is consider where birds have shown up and continue to show up along your path and in your stories. So I ask you just a couple of minutes ago to think about what was your earliest memory of a bird. And this is where we have the interactive piece. I'm inviting you, please try not to be shy, to gather either 3 or 4 of you, preferably with someone you don't know, with someone you maybe didn't come with necessarily, and share about your earliest memory of a bird. Now, for some of you, that might have been on the way in because you knew you were coming to this talk and you were being brought by somebody else. You can admit that. And for some of you, you may think back not too long ago. And for others, like me, we have to think way, way, way back. Whatever that is, I want to ask you to spend a few minutes, and I'll watch the time, and share your earliest memory of a bird. Please. Okay, let's just one more minute. Okay. Who would like to share one of their stories? Who would like to share a story? Let's hear from 2 or 3, possibly 4. I love it. This always happens that folks volunteer other people. That always happens. My, oh my.
Oh my gosh. Okay, my first experience with birds was that we had a woman who took care of us kids, and she was from Portugal, and she stayed with us. There was 5 of us, and we lost our mother at a young age. So she was there to keep us in line, and she killed chickens in the cellar and would string them up on the clothesline, and we would eat a lot of chicken. So that was my very first experience, and I didn't want to be a chicken ever. And we were always in line and doing whatever she wanted because she was the lady with the big knife and the rubber boots. And that was that.
And for those of you who are wondering, are chickens birds? Yes, they are. I know they're domesticated, and sometimes the controversy of wild versus domesticated. And I posit here today that chickens are birds. In fact, they're the closest relative to the dinosaur, right? All you bird nerds agree? Okay, then, they're birds. Another story up in the back. We have a mic up there, so no worries for that. On the right?
The story.
We're getting there.
I grew up in Buffalo, New York, which has a very long and serious winter. And so as a little girl, I remember watching for the robins to come and build their nest because it meant that springtime was finally going to come. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? One more story? Did you all hear? There? Yes.
It was a spring morning. I already told the. I was 12 years old, delivering newspapers in a town of 96 people in upstate New York. And a hurricane had come through, and as I'm delivering the morning paper, there's this little blob on the ground, and I picked it up, and I took it to my parents, and I said, look at what I found out there in the street. And just as I showed it to them, it went in my hand. And I go, ooh. And from that point on, his name was Poopsie. Well, we started feeding him bread and milk. It had no feathers. It was almost just out of the egg. And it eventually gained feathers. And then my mother, I had it in a shoebox. My mother made me take it outside. We lived on a farm. And on the back patio, I put it out there. And every morning he'd fly off, or wherever. And in the morning I'd call Poopsie. He'd come down, and I'd feed him his bread and milk until sometime in late June or early July, we playing catch with my father in the backyard, and he got his first worm. And then Audubon Society, who worked with my father, said he'd never heard of a robin living in captivity as long as I had it. And then in August, it became more wild. It had a black dot on its breast. I wasn't able to call it any longer after August, but he came back every year she came back every year and had babies for 4 or 5 years, and then that was it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's the power of our stories. You just witnessed that. Aren't birds beautiful? They're feathered gifts. Thank you. And I have to say that I came to birds, and again, this book, this presentation is a lot overlaps with my book. It was inspired by my book. It's because that was my life, and it's capturing different aspects of that, including story, including all the things we'll just go through, and I know we don't have a lot of time. But it literally took me going to Houston, staying with a friend from high school, my sister friends here, and being I went to a writer's workshop to write a book about children, for a children's book, about having gone to Cuba with my husband. And while at the Hay House Publishers workshop, the CEO said, write what you're passionate about. And I went to lunch by myself, and it was during that lunch that I came to know, I'm passionate about birds. They've helped me. I've healed with them. That's why I'm here. That's why that's what I should be doing. And that ultimately, without going through the long story, culminated into the book that you see out there today called Keep Looking Up, Your Guide to the Powerful Healing of Bird Watching. So full circle with that too. As I said, we're in San Diego. I'm proud to be a San Diego native. Yay, San Diego. I'm sure you recognize all of this. And many, many birds, a vast majority of the birds that come through North America do come through on the Pacific Flyway through San Diego. We have the lagoons. We have terrain in a region that really is inviting for many, many birds. And I won't go through all of that. Look through the Audubon and other clubs if you're interested in birds to find out more. But we are fortunate to have birds, many, many birds that come through different times of the year, as well as residents that are here year-round. This is a quick mural. This is a mural of local birds, San Diego region birds, that was done by the San Diego City College Audubon Club. It's a very active club that is very much involved with conservation in conjunction with San Diego Audubon. And on their campus, they have painted, and that took a lot of time, and the admiration I have for them that they worked on this in conjunction with the art department, headed by Lisa Chaddick, who is also with San Diego Audubon and is also a professor at San Diego City College and advises the club. So if you ever get a chance, go take a look at that. It's beautiful. And by the way, it's the first installation on the West Coast. If you've been to New York, there's the East Coast Mural Project by Audubon. This is the first installation on the West Coast. California is moving forward with making sure that access to nature, including birds, is equitable and accessible for all. That is how we collectively have well-being. That means the 30 by 30 legislation that was passed. That means by the year 2030, 30% of our lands must be set aside and allocated as natural spaces so that there is this access in conjunction with the equal access. So I just wanted to share that. And like my book starts out, I wanted to focus and remind us that we can start at home, that we can connect at home. For many of us, home is comfort, home is solace. We return to home most often. And for those who may feel like, well, my childhood home may not have been the most hospitable or welcoming or loving, I hope that you've maybe created a home, a nest for yourselves in your adult life many, many times. And like birds, we also foster and create a sense of belonging. And that's why I want to really encourage you to feel like you can connect with birds from home without having to go thousands of miles or even any long distance at all. No matter where you live, what kind of space, there's still going to be birds. So please consider that's the connection. For me, my story, the big piece of this was I was working many, many hours, many weeks, just 60, 70 hours as an administrator for mental health outpatient clinic, and suddenly had to stop for medical purposes. And I went into depression at the loss of a life that I had become accustomed to, what I knew. And so there was a lot of grief with that. And so grief can be, yes, the loss of a loved one. We can also grieve the loss of a life you once had, even possessions, a pet, a life you imagined that is now no longer. So grief can show up in many, many ways. Along with that is the loss of what you did know, what was familiar to you. And your response to that could be depression, sadness, a lot of mixed emotions, anger. I went into a deep depression, and a lot of times and I'm talking about this, I am a licensed therapist, and I felt compelled to also share this story authentically because too much stigma has plagued our community, has plagued our world, and as a result, people suffer in silence. and it just breeds more of the same. And so sharing about this is an opportunity to feel free like birds and really talk about this and really address some of the needs that we have. And so for me, from the chronic pain, I developed what's considered a rare neurological condition. And I really became very couch-bound, tried all kinds of medications. They weren't effective, other than to really sink me deeper. And ultimately, I just was shut down and very depressed. And then one day, while at the kitchen window, I happened to truly and literally look up. We have a fountain in front of the kitchen window, and there's this very large tree, which was very small when we first planted it, but it now towers up over the second story. And I happened to look up, and I saw this yellow flutter go by. And at first I thought it was blossoms on the tree. And then further observation, the bird began to come down towards the fountain. I realized it was this yellow bird. And this is the actual yellow bird. The yellow, at the time I didn't know it was a yellow warbler. This is a yellow warbler, a male yellow warbler. At that time I had not a clue. Pardon the pun, but I didn't. And I looked for that little yellow bird time and time again, and it kept coming and showing back up. And as that happened, I began to notice other birds in the yard and to see the backyard as a refuge and as a place of solace rather than what I had lost. I began to see life again. And that's what began to create this sense of connection again to the more than natural world, one that I had had as a very young girl on that farm and going all about, including here at Balboa Park and everywhere else with my parents. And I had lost that through the life and living. And this began to take and connect me further. And so I started to get curious about what else was in the yard. I didn't know. I knew what a dove was. I knew what a crow was. I didn't realize that ravens could look like crows, so I hadn't gotten that far along. And so I really got brave. And I decided, I got a guidebook. I started to figure out more, and I thought, you know what? Look at this. I have this Ben Dyer's thrasher in the backyard. I'm going to put it on ebook. And those of you who bird, there's this app where you can put what birds are in your yard. And so I had listed my backyard as part of the location for ebook and put this Ben Dyer's thrasher on there. And this was back when our phone number was still listed, and folks started calling. Can we come see it? Can we come by? Can we post in your backyard? Can we plant ourselves? And I was to my husband, I was like, Harrison, what's happening? Why is everybody wanting to come to our yard? And yes, I put this movie up here. That's also controversial. It is a fun movie. I don't care. Some folks don't necessarily think it's accurate enough. To me, it seems pretty accurate. So if you see this movie, or you'll appreciate this. All that to say, it was not a Ben Dyer's rare thrasher that would not show up in California. It was a California thrasher, which would be common. And so that terrified me, but it also thrilled me. And so this is the benefits of bird watching or birding, which is another way of saying it being inclusive, because you don't have to see to connect with birds, right? We can hear them, we can sense them, we can feel them. We can think about them. Being at home, as we mentioned, is one way. And then there's the power of the flock. Among birds, and I'm keeping this really quick and cursory, flocks of birds have different names. They have been given different names. Again, they're not the scientific ones, but they do illustrate the beauty of birds. Flock also provides protection, a sense of belonging for birds. And some flocks are made of mixed up species of birds, some that feed high up in the trees, others that might feed low on the ground. And so collectively they work together to provide a sense of belonging and safety. And so what I say is we also can have flocks. We also are part of flocks. This happens to be, I don't even know how many know I took this picture long ago, at the beach. This is Buena Vista Audubon, a bird outing. And if you notice, there is unity in community. There are a lot of outdoor, nature-based groups that focus on all kinds of identities and affiliations so that what you feel comfortable with or you would like to become familiarized with something different, there's so many that you can look for. So just go online. I have resources on my website, but they're available throughout, and I encourage you to consider that, very much so. And to think about who are your flocks. We have more than one. We have several flocks that we belong to. Our family, our friends, our co-workers, religious or spiritual, volunteerism, professional affiliations, associations, etc. And think about that. And what I want to offer to you and invite you is to consider expanding your flock and consider a mixed flock. Expand yourself into maybe a flock you're unfamiliar with and see the beauty and the joy that you can get from that as well. We are enhanced by our differences as much as with that which we have to be the same. I said that, just by the way. That's me talking. I didn't quote that, that's me. And birds, we can connect with them in a mindful way. They remind us that we can soar, that we can be free. And I came to this at a very low period in my life in one way, and that was my mother was very, very ill. We were trying to figure out everything that was going on with her. Ultimately, we determined she had Alzheimer's and a neurological condition, Parkinson's. But we were in the process of trying to figure all of that out. And this is a woman who, I don't have a lot of heroes. She is my main hero. And you'll see that I dedicated the book to Fran. And I use her first name, not out of disrespect, but out of honoring to my mother. My mother is a strong force. She was always ahead of her time. She was a rebel. She was forward-thinking. In fact, she told me that one day cars would drive themselves, and I thought that she has lost her mind. Like, my poor mother is so insane. Cars will never drive themselves. Okay, here we are. Like I said, she was ahead of her time. And so she was fiercely independent and had always been. And so trying to help, and those of you who are caregivers or will be caregivers, there's the highs and the lows. And just like in life, not everything is rosy and perfect. We're going to have the low periods of illness, of sadness, all kinds of emotions, just as much as we're going to have the joy and exhilaration of life and living. And quite honestly, in our society, we're really geared towards only focusing and celebrating the highs and the great points, which doesn't allow the acknowledgement and the reality that the other side of that is also worth honoring and celebrating when we are sad, when we are down, because that is how you move through and heal. And what I invite for you is to use birds, to join with birds, to commune with birds as a way to heal, to offer you what they can. And for each of us, it can be very different. And I just want to offer you this exercise. Remember, it's interactive. And so I want to invite with you to try and soar, to connect with a bird. So I'm just going to ask you, we're going to just do this for about a minute and a half, 90 seconds. And I'm doing this to help illustrate what you can do anywhere that you are at any time. So imagine a bird that you noticed today. Just think about the bird. And then I want to invite you to close your eyes and see the bird in your mind. Envision the bird. Breathe as you normally do. And just notice the feathers. Where is the bird? What color are its legs? What is it doing? And as it takes off and takes flight, and I want you to envision that the bird does in fact take flight, from your presence, I want to invite you to send along with it a worry, a concern, something that you need to let float away for a bit with that bird. You see, you can do that anytime and any place. So I hope that you'll retain that experience in your memory, and part of when you leave here today is take that with you, that practice. Here are some of the benefits to our health that have been substantiated by research, aside from the anecdotal experiences that many have that connect with birds already. It's been shown that it reduces stress, chronic conditions, it reduces pain, high blood pressure.